Hi everyone, welcome to day 39 of our 40 days with the Holy Spirit with this book by Jack Levison. We're nearly there, but at the same time it's only the beginning. Today we have the story that most people associate with the Holy Spirit, the story of Pentecost from Acts chapter 2. I'm just going to read a short extract from it for you. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each one of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other languages, as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each one of them. Amazed and astonished, they asked, "Are not all of these who are speaking Galileans? How is it then that we can hear, each of us, in our own native language? Parthians and Medes, Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, all in our own languages, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power." All were amazed and perplexed, saying to one another, "What does this mean?" But others sneered and said, "They are filled with new wine." So that's a well-known reading that we read pretty much every Pentecost. What I love about this Jack Levison book is that he helps us not only to be aware of the wonderful texts such as this, but also perhaps have a slightly different take on things. And I don't know about you, but often when I think about Pentecost, I think about fire and I think about wind, and I think also about maybe speaking in other languages. But he particularly picks up on this phrase that is used about speaking deeds of power, the mighty deeds of power of God. And he explains that that isn't just about physical power as in great things that God has done in terms of parting waves or whatever. It's about salvation history, and that salvation history going right the way back in history itself, to Abraham and all those who have come after him. And in my mind, I've sort of got the image really of Stephen and his great speech in Acts chapter 7, where he goes right the way back and begins by telling the story of God. But here's the thing. The story of God not only includes all the people from the Jewish faith, and then adding the Christian community into it with the person of Jesus. The story went on to include the disciples, and through the disciples, thousands, millions of Christians that have been the carriers of that Holy Spirit down the generations until it gets to us. Beginning on Friday, we hope to begin looking at the story of many of the Celtic saints that formed the gospel in our land. And we're going to look at how their story also can be our story too. But the thing is that it comes down to us and to our journey of faith. What is our gospel story of the powerful deeds of God? Both looking back through the scriptures, partly about knowing our Bibles really well, but it's also about seeing ourselves in the story as part of what is happening in this generation. Not only then are we looking at what God is saying as we emerge from lockdown and what we can learn of the person of God and of our own future from this time, but also what is our witness to God's love in our own individual lives, both in lockdown and before, and as we emerge from it. And that story is the story of witness by the Spirit each and every day for each and every person. And it can be quite hard to get in touch with that. We much prefer to talk about other people or information or the Bible even. No, it needs to be personal, and it needs to be where we find ourselves, not just knowing about God, but as we walk in relationship with God. The highs, the lows, the joys, the dry times, but also the hope. When we can do that, and we can then speak that out, we may be able to speak in many different languages, online and physically, not just then about information, but of a living God who has always loved us and will indeed love us always. Not just us, but every individual, and as a Franciscan I would say the whole of creation. And that love never changes. Good news as we come to our last day and the work of the Spirit. Bye for now. God bless.